Well, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, God is one. Christ is risen. Well, here in the monastery, it's an absolutely beautiful day. I was just looking through the curtain at it. I can see 9 large geese. They have grown like mad since I last talked about them. They're big and fat and juicy looking. I know a lot of people, I think, that would just be licking their lips at the sight of them, but they look so good, those. And the grass has grown really well, so there's plenty for them to eat now, whereas earlier on in the year, when it was very dry, there was very little indeed for them to have. Let's see who's here. Good morning. And Elizabeth, and Dino, and Gary, and Vicky, and Anton, who's enjoying a rainy day in Farnborough. That's surprising. Good morning, Jovan and Ahmed. Good morning. God bless you. Christ is risen. I spent some time gardening this morning around the back near the chapel. A huge number of weeds have grown up in a very short space of time, so some of them really rather large. So I was pulling those out and filled a large wheelbarrow full of them, which is rather nice. I'll go back and do a bit more of that later on, as long as it's not too hot, because it is. It's getting very hot now. We've got other people here as well. Happy Friday, Anton. And Ian, wasted of us crazy. Right, today, having just said Christ is risen, we're going to read a bit about the crucifixion of our Lord. Let's put this microphone a bit closer, then it should be a bit clearer. Okay, I can see there's a little dial at the bottom there that goes up and down depending on how loudly you can hear me. So John chapter 19, verses 16 to 22. Then he, that's Pontius Pilate, delivered him to them, and the them in this case here are the chief priests and the Pharisees, to be crucified. Then they took Jesus and led him away. Christ is risen, Father Alexander, your prayers. And he, bearing his cross, went out to a place called the place of a skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha, where they crucified him and 2 others with him, one on either side, and Jesus in the center. Now Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross, and the writing was, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Then many of the Jews read this title, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. Therefore the chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, do not write the King of the Jews, but he said, I am the King of the Jews. Pilate answered, what I have written, I have written. Long last, Pilate gets some backbone. Good morning, Tony. The monsoon continues in Ireland. Oh well, we can look forward to a bit of rain here before long, here as well as in Farnborough. Good morning, Judy. I hope you're feeling a bit better today. Right, verse 16 then. We'll go back to there. Then he, Pilate, delivered him to them to be crucified. And they took Jesus and led him away. 2 interesting words there. The first one is delivered, and the second one is took. You remember the word for being betrayed or handed over. Now the Lord said, the person who's going to hand me over, I will be betrayed. Well, that word there is paralavon. Sorry, no, it isn't. It is paradoken, okay, being handed over. And that paradoken has got the idea of betrayal, but also of being handed over in order to be sacrificed. It's got this being handed over sacrificial tone to it. So paradoken, afton, aftis, handed him over to them. Okay? To the who? Well, the high priest and their minions. Of course, he actually handed them over to the Roman soldiers, and they then took him out and did what they were going to do with him. But the high priest was the one who had demanded this, and therefore really what it means is that Pontius Pilate gave in to them and allowed them to get on with it. Okay? Now, the high priest, therefore, it's quite clear to John that the high priest is the one who, in the end, is also responsible. They can't wriggle out of it. You cannot say, oh, well, it was actually the Romans who crucified Jesus, therefore the Jewish high priest has got no part in this. It is clear from the Gospels that it was a cooperative effort in the end. Pilate was unwilling. He knew this man was innocent, but he also, in the end, did not have sufficient backbone in order to, or power, or ability to stop this happening. He could not carry on. It's rather like more recently there have been various trials in Britain where it's quite obvious what the crowd would like. They'd like somebody's blood, but actually the trial has failed because there's just not enough in the way of evidence, or there is no evidence, or the willingness to get somebody rather on the hook for doing something a long time ago, or even a short time ago, just is not there. And at that point, the trial, the judges, everybody else must say, well, I know what everybody wants. I need to make a very unpopular decision, but unfortunately, or fortunately, these people must go free because we can find nothing against them, and off they will go. And then the other word there is one word I said earlier on, which is paralavon, which is they received. So on the one hand, paralambano, to hand over, I hand over, and on the other hand, paralabon, they received. And these two words are important. So the Gentiles hand over, and Jesus is received by the high priest. Okay, it's the two parts of the sacrifice. It's rather like if somebody brings prosphora to church and wine, they will hand it over, but I need to receive it. If I don't receive it, I cannot then serve the liturgy. So the two parts of that are important, and both of them have this put together, both of them particularly, both of them have this sacrificial overtone, and that sacrifice has to be kept in mind, okay, all the way through. Jesus himself is not an unwilling and passive character within this. He is actively involved in the sacrifice itself. Okay? Who do they hand over? Well, at this point, John is making it quite clear who. It's Jesus who they took. There's no doubt about who they took. And he's speaking as one who saw. We know that from later on. But actually, there's something about the sparseness and economy of his words in all of this section here, that this is an eyewitness who is deeply affected by it, and he's blurting out what he saw, maybe behind tears. We'll read that again. It's very clear who it is. Okay? Then he delivered him, Pontius Pilate delivered him, Christ, to them to be crucified. Then they took Jesus and led him away. Took Jesus. Now, you might say, well, we know that because it's in the Bible, and that's what it's all about. But John is having to make it clear, even back then, that the Lord Jesus Christ really did die. This happened to him. There's no accident. It didn't happen to somebody else. They didn't accidentally pick up some poor fellow wandering along called Brian and crucify him by accident. They crucified Jesus. It was no accident. They actually did take Jesus himself, not a shadow, not something else. In his flesh, they took him and they crucified him. That's something that even nowadays the Muslims cannot abide. They will argue about that one. And so there's no doubt about who it was and what they did. Okay? That he comes out carrying his own cross. And he, bearing his cross, went out to a place called the place of a skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha. There they crucified him and two others with him, one on either side, and Jesus in the center. Now again, we've got John making it quite clear. You notice the way that he doesn't actually talk about Simon and Cyrene. Simon is not important to him because the Lord, what John is making it clear of is that it was the Lord, presumably he started off carrying his cross, we know that after a while he couldn't carry it anymore, and Simon Cyrene was compelled in order to carry it on his behalf. And we'll just deal with Golgotha, Calvary, and so on for a moment. In Greek, it's called cranium. Okay, the skull. Cranium is where we get the word cranium from in English. Kraniotopon. Okay, the place of the skull. Kraniotopon. And the Greek word for skull is cranium. The Latin one is calvaria, and that's where we get the word Calvary from, same place. And in Hebrew, the same word is Golgotha. It's quite interesting. If you read the Greek there, it said in Hebrew, Hebrea, and also in Elleniki, and also in Romaniki, in Roman. Did it in Roman, in Latin. Okay, and they took him to the place of the skull, which presumably was named after that because there were skulls of people who had been executed hanging around there. Now, in fact, that's what most of the fathers say about it. One or two like to say that it is by tradition the place of the burial of Adam. And then Jerome, who spent an awful long time, as you probably know, in and around Jerusalem and spoke Hebrew fluently and read the Old Testament in Hebrew and spent a huge amount of time talking to the various Jews in the area, said about it being the place of the burial of Adam. He said, it sounds nice, it's a nice idea, but it's complete nonsense. This is not where Adam was buried. So it's a nice idea. You know, it appeals to the imagination. And there we can leave it, he says. Jerome, from time to time, I mean, he was a difficult customer. If you go and read his hagiography, he lives in the 5th century. You can see why it is that a lot of people really did not like him at all. He got under their fingernails and irritated them beyond measure. And he could say he definitely did not mince his words. When he was being nice, he was very, very nice, and when he wasn't, he was quite horrid. And quite often he was quite horrid. And for this reason, when powerful people died, he was thrown out of Rome, and this is one of the reasons why it was he went back to Jerusalem. Anyway, he also says it's called that because that's where they chopped people's heads off, and they left them there in order to rot, so it became a place full of bones and skulls and other things like that. Okay? Now, that's interesting. So we have a person, we have a place. We know also from one or two of the verses before, verse 14, we know the time. So here we are in verse 18 by now. We now have the time, the 6th hour, the person, Jesus, the place, Golgotha, and we also have how. Okay, he's crucified between two people. So the things that coppers look for when they're looking for evidence is they look for who, when, where, how, and what. Okay? Who, when, where, how, what. And that's what you have here. John actually says, look, folks, I was an eyewitness. So who? Jesus. When? Midday. Where? Golgotha. How? Between two criminals. What? They crucified him. Okay, so you've got all of those things there from John, who says later on that he was an eyewitness of this. And that's not unimportant. Two others as well, crucified on either side of him. I quite like the way the Greeks say that, actually. They say on this side and this side in Greek. On this side and this side. In other words, and then Jesus in meso, in the middle of them, in between. Now, we don't know who these two are, except from tradition that one of them is called Dismas, and they are quite possibly Joshua Barabbas's men who have been brought in order to be crucified on either side of the Lord. I think it's Josephus who says that, but I meant to look that up earlier on, but I didn't do. So you've got two people who are brigands, they're robbers, they're murderers, depending on which gospel we're looking at. And it's possible they've been brought to Jerusalem. It's said that there were 300 people crucified round about then, and these ones, 3 of them, 1% of them, including the ringleaders, were brought out to Jerusalem to be executed in front of all the Jews, so they get a good idea about what happened to them if they too were to rebel. Okay, and the title is important. First of all, the languages that are being used. So you've got the local language, Hebrew, the local official language, Hebrew. It's not written in Aramaic. You've got it in Roman, Romani, and you've also got it in Greek, which was the universal language of that area of the world at that time. And the purpose of this is to make it clear that what they're saying about this particular man is for everybody. Okay? It's the Roman governor who's written it, a Gentile, who's written it about the Lord, and accidentally he has prophesied about who it is that he's choosing to crucify. It is the King of the Jews. And in these different languages, let nobody misunderstand. This is the King of the Jews. I want you to know that in Hebrew. I want you to know it in Roman. I want you also to know it in Greek. So everybody knows that this is who it is that is being crucified, King of the Jews. And the word, the King of the Jews, is important, by the by, because you'll see it contrasts to something else in a moment. So let nobody misunderstand. Now, the high priest, he understands all too well. Who is the King of the Jews? The answer is God. The God is the King of the Jews. And therefore, when he sees the King of the Jews crucified there, and he hears and sees the notice above, he goes and has a look. Presumably, he knows who Jesus is, because he should do, because even though bleary-eyed the night before, he'll still recognize the person he's had before Pilate, and he knows this man is going to die, and he's glad about it. He wants him to die. So again, for all those people who think that Jesus wasn't really crucified, but somebody else was crucified in his place, or alternatively, he only had the appearance of being crucified, you've got a pretty good witness there. Somebody who urgently and ardently desired the Lord to be crucified. Okay, so again, we've got that there. Let everybody understand, this man is the King of the Jews. All can read it. Now, here we have an interesting thing. It says on there, O Vasileus ton Judaion. Okay, O Vasileus ton Judaion. And immediately after we're told that the high priests of the Jews go and complain. Okay, the King of the Jews, the high priests of the Jews. There's no accident there. The evangelist has done that absolutely deliberately. It's easier actually if you read it in Greek. So o, e, okay, the and the. Vasileus, the king, Achiris, the high priests, and then the other two words are identical. Ton Judaion, of the Jews. And John is quite deliberately saying, on the one hand, you've got the King of the Jews, and on the other hand, over here, you've got the High Priest of the Jews. Now, the King of the Jews is God. And the High Priest of the Jews, they're there to serve God, not to execute him. And so you've got this quite deliberate bit of poetry that John has pushed in here to make it quite clear what is going on. And the Acharis on the Judaion don't like that. They rush off to Pilate and they say, you can't write that because that means God, so you've got to change it. Write instead, he said that he was King of the Jews. Then that's fine. because then he's being executed for blasphemy rather than for being God. But Pilate, inspired by God, and at long last having grown a bit of backbone that has been absent since birth, says, and it's a definitive statement, what I have written, I have written. You know, tough luck, folks. I'm leaving it as it is. Okay, really important that. So there's no doubt about it at all in John's mind, and therefore in our mind, that the notice above the Lord is absolutely correct in every detail. The person being here sacrificed, executed, is indeed God. Okay? And it's a little bit of a convoluted way of putting that, but there are quite a number of people who say, well, I believe in Jesus as a good teacher, as a prophet even. There's a whole religion that calls him a prophet, as a good man, but not as God. But that then shows their ignorance of these passages here that make it quite clear that Jesus is either God or he's nothing. He's completely failed or he is God and absolutely succeeded. And given what he says at the end in verse 30, where he says, it is completed, the sacrifice is now complete, then we can assume that he knows what he's doing. Okay, there we go. That's as far as we're going to go today. Tomorrow is Saturday, so we won't meet. I apologize for yesterday. I arrived, it took longer for me to get here than I thought. There were an awful lot of roadworks on the way, so although I left very early, by the time I arrived here, I was pretty tired, and couldn't go on any further. So I am who I am, ego eime, the sound of God. If you say it in Hebrew, it sounds like the breeze going through the trees. Yahweh, the name of God, the still small voice of quiet. So what have people been saying? We say good morning there. Good morning, Melengath. Hearing us loud and clear. Christ is risen, cooler today and slightly dull at present, but that's good. Means you can crack on with all sorts of work. It's a bit too hot here for cracking on with all sorts of work. It's very bright and very beautiful. You need to pray for Melengath, please. She has an interview for a job next week, which day I have gotten, but I think it's on Tuesday. Is that right? You can tell us, then we can all pray for you. Tony needs to buy himself some flippers because he's getting sick there in Ireland. It won't be a nice warm monsoon. The whole country is a sort of rainforest. Again, Judith. Was then Adam created on the spot of the dome of the rock? No. I think we can say. We can say so theologically. It's quite interesting, actually, the spot of the dome of the rock, isn't it? It's meant to be a threshing floor. Now, I have seen any number of people threshing grain. Now, one thing I know about a threshing floor is this. It needs to be absolutely level. So it's flat and it's level. It is not tilted to one side. Ergo, it seems to me to be tricky, the idea that David would buy a threshing floor in order to build a temple upon it, which would want a nice flat surface for the temple, and it should be at an angle. That sounds to me to be unlikely, but who am I? I'm not an archaeologist. I know that because my life is not spent in ruins. Okay, so this is Adam. Adam is created and meant to wander the Garden of Eden. And I think we can say the Garden of Eden is not somewhere we're going to find on earth. According to the scriptures in the Old Testament, you'll find that it's in Mesopotamia, not in Jerusalem. On the other hand, when Abraham, and this is also absolutely pertinent to this, but I'm really going to mention it on Monday. When Abraham sacrifices or doesn't sacrifice Isaac, and there's something important about this actually, which I haven't mentioned, that the fact of the Lord carrying the wood of the cross. The fathers all say, I don't know how this has slipped my mind, but the fathers all say that the Lord carrying the wood of the cross is exactly like the son of Abraham, Isaac, carrying the wood for the sacrifice. The wood was being carried by the sacrificial lamb, and then the Lord says, no, I will provide a lamb. And that sacrifice, where the sacrifice of the lamb is being done, this is where we have to remember the Lord himself is the sacrificial lamb. He carries the wood of the cross, like Isaac did, to Calvary, where he is then sacrificed for the sin of the world. And he takes away the sin of the world. You have to have the entirety of the atonement, You have to keep in mind the entirety of salvation history for that. There is a definitive moment, but everything from the creation of the world and the ejection of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden into the world, and all the various things the Lord does in order to save them, and the whole of the incarnation, the life of Christ, the crucifixion through to the ascension, all of that is about the sacrificial atonement. Okay, all of it is. Right, here we go. Let's go back. So you have to have that idea of the Lord carrying the cross. That's what I forgot to say. Ahmed, I love the symmetry in the King of the Jews and the High Priest of the Jews. Yes, something to remember. There's hardly a word that John says that hasn't been really carefully thought out. They're not ignorant fishermen writing down from some point of view of simplicity. These are extremely cultured men who write the Gospels. And although I say men, it's actually the entirety of the church that wrote the Gospels, because these things have been honed and honed and honed over a long time, and preached upon and thought about and discussed, and gradually. Monday, it is Monday. Okay, God bless you. And you've got a rotten cold. Oh, God bless you again. Jovan says, Sunday is 1 year since my darling Marina went to sleep. Memory eternal indeed. And I will make sure that I pray for her on Sunday particularly. Okay. Christ is risen. May her memory be eternal. Good morning to Elias. No, it's just very loving. I love you, the way you do that. That's great. Father Alexander, when I am lifted up, I will draw all men to myself. Christ hears undoing Babel. Quite right. And that's another good example of where you go back into the, you get a lot of Christians to think, oh, the Old Testament, what value is that to us? But actually, you have to read the entirety of the Old Testament with Christ in mind. And then you see a golden key being placed into the scriptures, the resurrection Christ, of course, as he's walking to Emmaus with you, before he breaks, walking with Emmaus, isn't it interesting? The processions in the divine liturgy and the opening of the scriptures, the explaining of the scriptures, is then followed afterwards immediately by arriving in Emmaus and the Lord breaking the bread. So there's that liturgical feel to it that we have in our services. But if you think about the Lord walking along to Emmaus, talking with his disciples, that's Luke and Cleopas, and he's handing them the golden key of the resurrection. And with that golden key, you can then read the Old Testament, and you see that it's not really old at all. It constantly refers to Christ. Okay? Right, well, I think that is probably enough. So today we will pray and remember in our hearts both Marina and Jovan. And we'll remember also Melengeth, who definitely now needs a job, so please pray for her as well. This would be a good job for her, not far away from where she lives, and a mere hop, skip and a jump to the motorway in both directions, living in one nice village and going off to work in a very nice town. Okay, your prayers, God bless you.